Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies, where the line between dreams and nightmares blurs. Here we share spine-tingling stories that blend the thrill of horror with the calm of sleep, perfect for those who love a little fright before drifting off. If you love horror that lingers in the shadows of your mind, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more haunting bedtime stories. Hit the like button and subscribe if you're brave enough. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be the first to know when a new nightmare has been unleashed. And before you let sleep take you, tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments below. We'd love to see how far our nightmares reach across the globe. Rest if you can. Now our story begins. The bass from Club Infinity rattled the windows of nearby buildings along 8 Mile Road, its rhythm a familiar heartbeat in Detroit's restless night. Kendall Matthews stood at the bar, his muscular frame tensed as he watched the growing confrontation on the dance floor. As the leader of the East Side Kings, he'd learned to spot trouble before it erupted. Tonight, Trouble wore a stained white t-shirt and moved with an unnatural jerkiness that set off all his alarms. "Something's wrong with that dude," Corey Wilson muttered beside him. Kendall's right-hand man fingered the knife in his pocket, a nervous habit from their shared years on the streets. The man in question swayed near the center of the dance floor, bumping aggressively into other patrons. His skin had a sickly gray pallor under the strobing lights, and dark sweat stained his shirt despite the club's air conditioning. As Kendall watched, the man lurched into a young woman, causing her to spill her drink. "Hey!" Her boyfriend stepped forward, pushing the stranger back. "Watch yourself." The man's response was immediate and horrifying. He lunged forward with impossible speed, sinking his teeth into the boyfriend's neck. Blood sprayed across nearby dancers, who screamed and scrambled back. The girlfriend's shriek cut through the music like a knife. "Holy shit," Corey breathed, already moving forward. But Kendall grabbed his arm. "Wait," he ordered, eyes narrowing as the bitten man staggered, clutching his neck. Something was happening, something wrong. The victim's movements became jerky, spasmodic. Within seconds, he turned and attacked his own girlfriend, tearing into her arm with savage intensity. The club erupted into chaos. People rushed toward the exits, trampling each other in their panic. Kendall spotted Aaron Cruz, leader of the rival West Side crew, moving through the crowd with his lieutenant Christopher "Ghost" Rodriguez. Their eyes met across the room, decades of territory disputes and bad blood hanging between them. "We need to move," Corey urged, but Kendall was watching the growing number of infected. The original attacker had bitten 3 more people, and each victim turned within minutes, joining the frenzy. They moved with a predatory coordination that sent chills down Kendall's spine. The club's bouncer, Bobby Thompson, tried to intervene. Built like a linebacker, Bobby had broken up hundreds of fights during his tenure, but his size meant nothing as 5 infected swarmed him simultaneously. His screams joined the cacophony of terror. "The back exit," Kendall decided, grabbing Corey's shoulder. "Through the kitchen." They fought their way through the panicking crowd. Near the bar, Kendall spotted Maria Suarez, a trauma nurse who ran the free clinic in his territory. She was helping Paula Chen, one of the club's regular bartenders, climb over the bar to escape an infected patron. "Maria!" Kendall called out. "This way!" Maria looked up, her medical training evident in her calculated movements. She helped Paula over the bar, then grabbed a bottle of vodka and a lighter. As an infected woman lunged at them, Maria created an improvised flamethrower, driving the attacker back with a stream of burning alcohol. "Damn," Corey whispered admiringly. "That's hot." "Focus," Kendall snapped, though he had to admit it was impressive. They reached the kitchen doors just as Aaron and Christopher arrived with their crew member Lorna Rodriguez, no relation to Ghost. The 2 gang leaders exchanged tense looks. "Temporary truce?" Aaron proposed, his voice tight as more screams erupted from the main room. Kendall nodded curtly. "Until we're clear." The kitchen was a maze of stainless steel and shadows. Paula, who knew the layout, took the lead. "Loading docks through here," she directed, moving between prep stations. "There's a security door." A figure burst from the walk-in freezer, one of the kitchen staff, but his eyes were wild, blood dripping from his mouth. Christopher reacted first, shoving Lorna behind him as he drew his gun. The shot rang off the metal walls, catching the infected man in the chest. He stumbled but didn't fall. "The head!" Maria shouted. "Aim for the head!" Christopher's second shot went through the infected man's forehead, dropping him instantly. But the noise had drawn attention. Shadows moved beyond the kitchen doors as more infected approached, drawn by the gunshot. "Doors locked," Paula called from the loading dock entrance. "Need the code." "Move," Lorna ordered, pulling lock-picking tools from her jacket. Her fingers flew over the electronic keypad, bypassing the security system with practiced ease. The door clicked open just as the kitchen doors burst inward. The scene that followed would haunt Kendall's nightmares for years. Infected poured into the kitchen like a wave of rabid humanity. Their movements had evolved in the short time since the initial attack, becoming more coordinated, more tactical. They used the kitchen islands for cover, working to cut off escape routes. "Go!" Kendall shoved Maria and Paula through the door. Corey laid down covering fire, his shots echoing in the confined space. Aaron and Christopher backed up the stairs to the loading dock, while Lorna held the door. But they weren't all going to make it. Kendall could see that already. The infected were too many, too fast, and too smart. They needed a distraction. "Get them out of here," he told Corey, grabbing a large pot from a nearby counter. "I'll draw them off." Like hell, Corey started to argue, but Kendall was already moving. He slammed the pot against the metal shelving units, creating a thunderous racket that drew the infected's attention. "Come on, you hungry bastards!" He backed toward a different door, leading to the club's offices. "Fresh meat right here!" The infected swarmed toward him as the others escaped through the loading dock. Kendall caught a glimpse of Maria's horrified face before Corey pulled her away. Then he was running through dark hallways, the sound of pursuit close behind. The office area was a maze of cubicles and file cabinets. Kendall weaved through them, knocking over shelves to slow his pursuers. He could hear them communicating, not with words, but with a series of clicks and growls that suggested developing intelligence. They were learning, coordinating their movements to cut off his escape routes. He burst into the manager's office, slamming and locking the door behind him. A window overlooked the back alley, 2 stories up. Not an ideal escape route, but better than the alternative. As he moved toward it, his phone buzzed. A text from Corey. "Made it to Maria's clinic. Whole neighborhood's going crazy. Where are you?" Before Kendall could respond, something massive slammed against the office door. The wood cracked but held. Another impact followed immediately, more coordinated than the first. They were working together now, synchronizing their attacks. Kendall typed quickly, "Stay there. Something's wrong with them. They're changing." The door exploded inward as Kendall reached the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. The infected moved like a single organism, flowing into the room with horrific grace. At their head was Bobby, the bouncer's massive frame now twisted by mutation. His muscles had grown grotesquely, skin split in places to reveal pulsing tissue beneath. But it was his eyes that struck Kendall. They showed intelligence, calculation, hunger. "Oh shit!" Kendall breathed. Then he dove through the window as Bobby charged. Glass shattered around him as he fell. The alley rushed up to meet him, promising either escape or a quick end. Kendall tucked and rolled, decades of parkour practice taking over. He hit the ground hard but managed to turn it into a roll that carried him back to his feet. Pain lanced through his shoulder, probably dislocated. But there was no time to deal with it. Above, infected poured from the broken window like a waterfall of corrupted humanity. They moved with impossible agility, some using the walls to slow their descent. Kendall ran. The streets of Detroit had never felt more alien. Cars burned at random intervals, casting everything in flickering orange light. Screams echoed from all directions as the infection spread through the densely packed neighborhood. But worse were the sounds of coordination. Whistles and clicks that suggested the infected were communicating, organizing. He reached Maria's clinic 20 minutes later, his lungs burning and shoulders screaming in protest. Corey let him in through a heavily barricaded door, quickly securing it behind them. "Jesus, you made it," Corey breathed, pulling him into a quick embrace. "We thought—" "They're evolving," Kendall cut him off, addressing the room at large. Maria had converted her clinic into a makeshift command center. Aaron and his people huddled near a window, weapons ready. Paula and Lorna worked on barricading another entrance, while Christopher monitored a police scanner. "What do you mean, evolving?" Maria asked, already moving to examine his shoulder. "They're getting smarter, coordinating, using tactics." Kendall winced as she manipulated his injured joint. "And some of them, they're mutating, physically changing." "Like Bobby," Paula said quietly. "Before we left, I saw him. His skin was wrong." "The virus, or whatever this is, it's not just making them violent," Maria theorized, resetting Kendall's shoulder with practiced efficiency. "It's rewriting their biology, upgrading them." "Upgrading them into what?" Lorna demanded. Before anyone could respond, Christopher called out from his position. "Police scanners going crazy. Similar outbreaks all over the city. National Guard's been mobilized." "They'll lock down the neighborhood," Aaron predicted grimly. "Contain the spread." "They'll try," Kendall corrected, remembering the intelligence he'd seen in the infected's movements. "But I don't think—" A massive impact shook the clinic's front door, cutting him off. Through the reinforced windows, they could see dozens of infected gathering outside. They moved with military precision, taking up tactical positions around the building. At their center stood Bobby, his mutated form even more grotesque than before. Muscles rippled beneath translucent skin as he directed his troops with inhuman intelligence. "We need to move," Aaron decided, checking his ammunition. "This place won't hold them long." "The basement," Maria suggested. "There's an old tunnel system under the clinic, left over from Prohibition, connects to the subway maintenance tunnels." "Underground?" Paula looked skeptical. "With those things out there?" "Better than staying here to die," Christopher pointed out, helping Lorna gather supplies. Another impact rattled the doors. The infected had found a steel beam and were using it as a battering ram, coordinating their strikes with terrifying efficiency. The barricades wouldn't last much longer. "Kendall?" Corey looked to his leader for direction. Kendall studied the room, former rivals and strangers brought together by crisis. Beyond the walls, he could hear the infected communicating in their evolving language of clicks and whistles. Soon they'd breach the clinic, and then, "We go down," he decided. "But we need to split up. Single groups too easy to track." He turned to Aaron. "Your crew takes the tunnel east, toward the river. We'll head west, try to reach the National Guard lines, draw them in different directions." Aaron nodded, years of street tactics recognizing the sound strategy. "What about the civilians?" "I'll go with Aaron's group," Paula volunteered. "I know the river district." "I'm with Kendall," Maria stated firmly. "You'll need a medic." They worked quickly, distributing supplies and weapons. The infected's battering ram had begun to splinter the reinforced door, sending wooden shards flying with each impact. Whatever they were becoming, they were getting stronger. "Ready?" Kendall asked as Maria opened the basement door. Below, concrete steps descended into darkness. Another impact shook the building. Through gaps in the barricades, they could see Bobby directing his troops with growing impatience. His mutations had continued. Bone spurs now protruded from his shoulders, and his jaw had distended to accommodate rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Move," Aaron ordered, leading his group down the stairs. "And Kendall?" He turned back briefly. "Watch your six. You too." The basement air was thick with decades of dust and decay. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow as they located the hidden tunnel entrance behind a false wall. Above, they could hear the infected finally breaching the clinic. "They'll figure out where we went," Corey warned as they entered the tunnel. "They're too smart now." "I know." Kendall took point, leading them into the darkness. "That's what I'm counting on." The tunnels stretched before them like an underground labyrinth, filled with shadows and echoes. Somewhere ahead lay either salvation or damnation. Behind them, inhuman sounds suggested the infected had found the basement entrance. The hunt was on. The maintenance tunnels beneath Detroit stretched endlessly into darkness, their concrete walls slick with decades of seepage. Kendall led his group forward, their flashlight beams cutting through the gloom like searching fingers. Every few minutes, distant sounds echoed through the tunnel system, sometimes screams from above, sometimes the coordinated movements of the infected searching for them. "They're in the tunnels," Corey whispered, his voice tight, getting closer. Maria checked her medical supplies as they moved. cataloging what she'd managed to grab from the clinic. The virus is mutating faster than anything I've ever seen. The way they're evolving, communicating. How long before they figure out to cut us off? Kendall asked, pausing at a junction. Water dripped steadily somewhere in the darkness, making it hard to pinpoint pursuit sounds. They already have, Christopher Ghost Rodriguez answered grimly. He'd chosen to stay with Kendall's group, his experience as a former tunnel rat proving invaluable. Listen. They fell silent. Through the complex network of tunnels, they could hear the infected's clicking communication coming from multiple directions. Not random sounds anymore, distinct patterns, like a crude language developing in real time. They're hurting us, Corey realized. Like wolves, Christopher agreed, driving us somewhere. A scream echoed through the tunnels, human, terrified, and close. Maria started to move toward it, but Kendall caught her arm. Could be Aaron's group, she argued. Or a trap, Kendall countered. They're learning to mimic. As if to prove his point, the scream came again, but this time it shifted midway into something inhuman. A hunting cry that was answered by others throughout the tunnel system. The infected were coordinating, using sound to track their prey's reactions. They moved deeper into the labyrinth, Christopher's knowledge helping them avoid dead ends and collapse zones. But the infected seemed to be everywhere now, their presence revealed by scratching sounds and glimpses of movement in connecting tunnels. Hold up, Christopher called softly, examining a junction ahead. Something's wrong. Kendall moved forward to look. The tunnel walls here showed fresh scratch marks, deep gouges in the concrete that no human hands could have made. Something had been changing down here, growing stronger. A whisper of movement was their only warning. A figure dropped from a maintenance shaft above. Bobby, but even more mutated than before. His massive frame had grown grotesquely, muscles rupturing through skin in places. Bone protrusions formed natural armor across his chest and shoulders. But worst was his face. His jaw had split vertically, forming quadruple mandibles filled with razor teeth. Run! Kendall shoved Maria aside as Bobby charged. The creature that had once been a bouncer moved with impossible speed, but its new mass worked against it in the narrow tunnel. Kendall rolled under a swinging arm, feeling the air displacement as claws missed him by inches. Corey opened fire, his shots echoing deafeningly in the confined space. The bullet struck Bobby's bone armor, ricocheting harmlessly. The creature turned with frightening intelligence, its split jaw spreading in what might have been a smile. This way! Christopher called from a side tunnel. Maintenance room ahead. They sprinted through the darkness, Bobby's roars echoing behind them. Other infected answered his call, their cries coming from multiple directions. The hunt was reaching its climax. The maintenance room was a concrete box filled with decades-old equipment. Christopher slammed the heavy door shut behind them, spinning the locking wheel. That won't hold him long, Kendall said, searching for another exit. There, a ladder led up to what looked like a service entrance. Wait, Maria called, examining the old equipment. Look at this. She pointed to scratch marks on the machinery, similar to those in the tunnel, but older. Many older, some partly hidden by rust. This has happened before, she realized. Maybe not exactly the same, but something like it. The city covered it up. A massive impact shook the door, followed by the sound of tearing metal. Bobby had found them. Great history lesson, Corey said, helping Christopher stack equipment against the door. But how does that help us now? Because, Maria explained quickly, if this happened before, there might be contingencies in place. Emergency protocols. She pointed to faded warning signs on the wall. This isn't just a maintenance room, it's part of the old flood control system. Kendall understood immediately. We can flood the tunnels? Another impact. The door began to buckle. If the systems still work, Maria qualified, but the infected are running hot. Their accelerated metabolism makes them vulnerable to temperature shock. Flood them with cold water. Do it, Kendall ordered. Corey, Christopher, buy us time. The door exploded inward, taking their barricade with it. Bobby's mutated form filled the entrance, his bone armor now covered in some kind of organic plating. Behind him, more infected gathered, their movements synchronized like parts of a single organism. Corey and Christopher opened fire, aiming for exposed flesh between armor plates. Bobby roared, a sound that shook dust from the ceiling, and charged forward. Maria worked frantically at the old control panel while Kendall provided covering fire. Nothing happened. "The system's dead," she cried. "No power." "Move!" Kendall spotted a fuse box on the wall. He emptied his magazine into it, sending sparks flying. The ancient equipment hummed to life. Bobby reached them just as Maria pulled the emergency release. Ancient pumps groaned to life somewhere in the darkness. The creature that had once been human hesitated, showing the first signs of uncertainty they'd seen. Water burst from multiple access points, filling the tunnel system with frigid liquid from the Detroit River. The infected's coordinated movements turned to panic as the cold water shocked their overheated systems. Bobby roared in pain as his mutations began to crack and split in the temperature change. "Up the ladder," Kendall ordered. "Now!" They climbed as the room filled with water and thrashing infected. Bobby made one final attempt to reach them, his clawed hand catching Kendall's leg. But the cold was affecting him too severely. His grip weakened, and Kendall kicked free. They emerged through a manhole into chaos. The streets above were a war zone. Military helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through smoke from burning buildings. In the distance, they could hear gunfire and explosions as the National Guard fought to contain the outbreak. "Look," Christopher pointed toward 8 Mile Road. A massive military convoy was approaching, led by armored vehicles. "They're setting up a quarantine zone." "Aaron's group," Maria remembered. They were heading toward the river. Kendall checked his phone, but the military had knocked out cell service to prevent panic from spreading. There was no way to know if the others had survived. A new sound cut through the night, a high-pitched keening that made their teeth ache. From other manholes and tunnel entrances, infected began to emerge. The cold water had killed many, but those that survived seemed to be adapting, their mutations accelerating to compensate. "They're evolving again," Maria observed clinically. "Every challenge makes them stronger." "Then we better end this fast." Kendall checked his remaining ammunition. "The National Guard will have a command center. They need to know what we've learned about the previous outbreak, about how they're changing." "You mean if we can reach it?" Corey said, watching more infected emerge from the underground. "When we reach it," Kendall corrected. He looked at his companions, a nurse, a gang lieutenant, a former tunnel rat, and his closest friend. An unlikely team, united by survival. "We're the only ones who know what we're really dealing with," he continued. "How they think, how they hunt. The military's fighting the infection they can see. We know what it's becoming." Above them, military helicopters began dropping flares, illuminating the streets in harsh white light. The infected moved through the artificial day like hunting packs, their mutations becoming more pronounced with each generation. Some now traveled on all fours, while others showed signs of even more extreme changes. "They're not just getting stronger," Christopher observed. "They're specializing, developing different types for different roles." "Like a hive," Maria agreed, "or an army." Kendall checked his weapons one final time. "Then let's make sure they lose this war." They moved through the ruined streets of Detroit, heading toward the military perimeter. Behind them, Bobby's roar echoed from below ground, different now, carrying harmonics that made windows vibrate. More infected took up the call, their cries mixing into a terrifying chorus. The evolution of 8 Mile's nightmare was entering its next phase, but this time, humanity would be ready.